Snow fell silently on a small Minnesota town as Jake Miller discovered them. A homeless mother and her twin girls huddled in a broken-down car behind his local diner. In that moment, seeing their breath fog up the frozen windows, he made a decision that would change all their lives forever. With only his modest home and barely enough to get by, Jake offered them shelter, warmth, and something they'd lost long ago: hope. Together, they built something beautiful from broken pieces, finding laughter in shared meals and comfort in simple moments. But when a private jet touched down on the outskirts of town, bringing with it an estranged mother-in-law worth millions, everything hung in the balance. What happens when old wealth meets new love? Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The winter sun hadn't yet risen when Jake Miller unlocked the front door of Miller's Diner. The familiar scent of coffee grounds and yesterday's grilled onions welcomed him home, because that's what the diner had become since Marie passed. A home away from home, a sanctuary of routine where every scratch on the counter told a story and every regular customer felt like family. He flipped through the old photo album he kept beneath the register, something he did every morning before. Opening, Marie's smile beamed up at him from their wedding photo, her dark curls caught in the summer breeze. 7 years had passed, but some mornings the loss felt as fresh as yesterday. "Dad, you're doing it again." Tommy's voice carried from the kitchen, where the 15-year-old was already loading dishes into the industrial washer. His son had grown tall this past year, shoulders broadening, voice deepening. Some days, Jake caught glimpses of the man his boy was becoming, and it filled him with equal parts pride and melancholy. "Just remembering, kiddo," Jake replied, closing the album carefully. "Your mom would have loved seeing you master that grill." Tommy's response was a non-committal grunt, but Jake noticed the small smile tugging at his son's lips. The boy had his mother's quiet strength, the kind that showed itself in actions rather than words. Every morning before school, Tommy helped prep the diner, not because Jake asked, but because that's what family did. The regulars started trickling in as the sky lightened. Old Bill with his crossword puzzle and black coffee. Sarah from the library ordering her usual whole wheat toast and scrambled eggs. Principal Martinez dropping in for his morning coffee before heading to the high school where Tommy attended. Each one greeted Jake by name, asked about Tommy's basketball season, shared bits of their lives across the weathered counter. "Order up," Jake called, sliding a plate of hash browns and eggs across the pass-through window. His hands moved with practiced efficiency, cracking eggs one-handed, flipping pancakes with perfect timing. The rhythm of the morning rush was as natural as breathing. Between orders, Jake caught Tommy studying the old help-wanted sign he'd pulled from storage. "Thinking of hiring someone?" his son asked, trying to sound casual. "Maybe," Jake admitted. "Business has been picking up since the factory reopened. Could use an extra pair of hands for the afternoon shift." He didn't mention that he'd noticed Tommy's growing pile of homework, the way his son's eyes drooped during evening study sessions. A father noticed these things. "Just make sure they know what they're doing," Tommy said, his protective instinct showing through. "This place, it's special," Jake finished. "I know, son. Your mom built it with me and you've helped keep it going. Anyone who joins us needs to understand that." The morning rush wound down and Tommy headed off to school, his backpack slung over one shoulder. Jake watched him go, remembering how Marie used to stand in this same spot, waving goodbye each morning. Their son had her eyes, her quiet determination. The diner had been their dream, his and Marie's. A place where good food and warm welcome mattered more than fancy tablecloths or expensive menus. They'd scraped together every penny, worked double shifts at other restaurants, lived in a tiny apartment above a hardware store until they could afford the down payment. Now, 7 years after Marie's passing, Jake still ran it the way she would have wanted. Fresh pies baked daily, coffee strong enough to stand a spoon in, and prices that working folks could afford. The worn booths and chipped mugs told stories of countless conversations, celebrations, and quiet moments of comfort. The weather report on the small TV above the counter warned of an approaching storm. Jake made a mental note to check the generator and stock up on supplies. Minnesota winters showed no mercy, and the diner often became a refuge for stranded travelers. Little did he know, as he wiped down the counter and tallied the morning's receipts, that this storm would bring more than just snow to his door. Sometimes life's biggest changes came disguised as ordinary moments, wrapped in the simple kindness of offering shelter from the cold. The storm arrived with dusk, painting the diner's windows with swirling ice crystals. Jake had just sent his last customer home with a to-go cup of hot chocolate when he noticed movement in his rearview mirror. A flash of brake lights in the backlot, barely visible through the thickening snow. At first, he thought someone had pulled in seeking directions, but as minutes ticked by and no one emerged, concern nudged him toward the back door. The security light illuminated an old Volvo station wagon, its once prestigious lines now worn by time and hard travels. Frost had claimed most of the windows, but through one clear patch he caught sight of something that stopped him cold, small fingers drawing patterns in the condensation. "Hello?" Jake called out, shielding his eyes against the wind. "Anyone in there?" The drawing stopped. After a moment's hesitation, the back window cranked down halfway, revealing two identical faces. Young girls, maybe 8 or 9, with matching wool caps pulled low over their ears. Behind them, a woman's voice whispered something, and one of the girls spoke up. "We're okay, sir. Just waiting for the storm to pass." But they weren't okay. Jake could see their breath clouding in the unheated car, could make out the pile of worn backpacks and blankets crowded into the back seat. The woman, their mother, he assumed, leaned forward, her face catching the security light. Despite obvious exhaustion, her features carried a quiet dignity. "I'm Sarah," she said, her voice cultured but weary. "These are my daughters, Lucy and Lily. We'll be moving along as soon as the weather clears." Jake glanced at the rapidly accumulating snow, then back at the 3 faces in the dying car. "Mum, this storm's supposed to last through tomorrow. Your engine's not running. Do you have enough gas to keep warm?" Sarah's hesitation told him everything. The twins huddled closer to her, their matching faces a study in practiced bravery. They'd done this before, Jake realized. Probably 2. Many times. "Look," he said, taking a step back to give them space. "I own the diner here. At least come inside where it's warm. Get some hot food in those girls, no strings attached." The twins' eyes lit up at the mention of food, but Sarah shook her head. "We couldn't." "Please, Mama," one of the girls whispered. "We're so cold." Something in Sarah's expression cracked just slightly. Jake recognized it, the look of a parent, weighing pride against their child's needs. He'd worn that same expression more than once after Marie died. "The special tonight was meatloaf," he said casually. "Made too much as usual. Hate to see it go to waste. And I've got hot chocolate with those little marshmallows kids like." The other twin tugged at her mother's sleeve. "Mama, please?" Sarah looked at her daughters, then back at Jake. He could see her studying him, weighing risks against desperate necessity. Finally, she nodded. The girls tumbled out first, clutching small backpacks that had seen better days. Their matching wool caps were hand-knitted, Jake noticed. Someone had once cared enough to make them with love. Sarah emerged more slowly, gathering what looked like all their worldly possessions into 2 larger bags. Inside the diner's warmth, the twins' identical features became more distinct. Lucy, Jake learned, had a small scar above her right eyebrow, while Lily's nose crinkled when she smiled. They ate carefully at first, taking small, measured bites as if making the food last. But as the evening wore on and Jake kept their plates full, their real personalities emerged. "Look, Mama!" Lily exclaimed, arranging her remaining green beans into a smiley face. Lucy immediately copied her, then added a carrot nose. Sarah watched her daughters with a mixture of love and worry that Jake knew all too well. When the girls weren't looking, he caught her blinking back tears. "There's a storm shelter attached." "To my house?" Jake said quietly, while the twins decorated their second hot chocolate with mini marshmallows. "It's got a spare room, private bathroom. Used to be an in-law suite before." He trailed off, but Sarah seemed to understand. "We couldn't impose." "It's not imposing if it's offered freely," Jake replied. "And no one should be sleeping in their car in this weather. Not with children." Sarah's hands tightened around her coffee cup. "We've managed." "Maybe," Jake said gently. "You don't have to just manage anymore." Outside, the storm howled against the windows, but inside the diner, something fragile and new was taking root, like the first green shoot breaking through winter soil, reaching toward warmth and light. Morning arrived with awkward shuffles and whispered voices. Tommy, already dressed for school, froze at the sight of the twins sharing cereal at his kitchen table. They wore matching flannel pajamas that Jake had unearthed from Marie's donation. Box in the attic, clothes she'd bought on sale, planning for the daughter they never had. "Dad?" Tommy's voice carried a mix of confusion and accusation. "What's going on?" Jake had explained the situation the night before, after settling Sarah and the girls in the shelter suite, but explaining and seeing were different things. The reality of strangers in their space hit harder in the morning light. "Good morning," Sarah said softly, rising from where she'd been helping Lily with a stubborn milk carton. "I'm Sarah Blackwood, and these are my daughters. We don't mean to intrude." "You're not intruding," Jake cut in firmly, setting a plate of scrambled eggs on the table. "Tommy, grab a chair. You need breakfast before school." The twins watched Tommy with identical expressions of cautious interest. Lucy whispered something to Lily, who giggled, then quickly covered her mouth. "What's funny?" Tommy asked, more defensive than curious. "Your shirt," Lily admitted sheepishly. "It's on backwards." Tommy flushed, tugging at his collar, but then Lucy added, "We do that all the time too." And somehow the shared embarrassment broke the ice. The first few days fell into an uneasy rhythm. Sarah insisted on earning her keep, despite Jake's protests. She proved surprisingly skilled in the diner's kitchen, her fingers remembering techniques from what she'd later reveal were childhood cooking lessons with a French chef. "These pancakes," old Bill declared one morning, "are lighter than air. Jake, you been taking classes?" Jake glanced at Sarah, who was quietly washing dishes in the back. "New recipe," he said simply, respecting her wish to stay out of sight. Some of the regular customers, she'd explained, might recognize her name. The twins adapted faster than the adults, their resilience showing in unexpected ways. They transformed the shelter suite with small touches, drawings taped to walls, a fort made from spare blankets, twin teddy bears stationed as guards at their bedroom door. The bears, Jake noticed, wore tiny knitted caps that matched the girls' own. Tommy's adjustment proved more complicated. Jake found him one afternoon in Marie's old garden, angrily pulling weeds. "They're using Mum's mugs," he said without looking up. "The ones with the birds on them." Jake sat on the garden bench, letting the accusation hang in the air. "Your mum," he finally said, "would have been the first one to offer those mugs. You know that, but they're not ours." Tommy yanked another weed. "They're just staying here. For now." Before Jake could respond, a small voice called from the back door. "Tommy, could you help us? We can't reach the top shelf." It was Lucy, or maybe Lily. Even after several days, Jake sometimes had trouble telling them apart. Tommy sighed dramatically, but stood up, brushing dirt from his knees. That evening, Jake found all three children huddled around the kitchen table, heads bent over Tommy's math homework. The twins were surprisingly good with numbers, suggesting an education that hadn't matched their recent circumstances. "See?" Lucy pointed at a problem. "If you cross-multiply here." "I know how to cross-multiply," Tommy grumbled, but he was smiling slightly. Sarah appeared beside Jake in the doorway, her eyes soft as she watched the scene. "They miss having an older brother," she whispered. "Their half-brother, James Jr. He stayed with his grandmother after..." She trailed off, pain flickering across her face. Jake wanted to ask more, but sensed it wasn't the time. Instead, he gestured toward the diner. "Could use some help with the dinner prep, if you're free." In the diner's kitchen, they worked in comfortable silence, Sarah's knife skills making quick work of the vegetables while Jake marinated chicken for the evening special. The rhythm felt natural, like they'd been cooking together for years instead of days. "Your son," Sarah said eventually, "he's a good boy. This can't be easy for him." "Neither. Can sleeping in a car be easy for your girls?" Sarah's hands stilled. "We did what we had to stay safe, to stay together." The weight of unspoken history hung between them, heavy as storm clouds, but like the storm that had brought them together, this too would break eventually. For now, they had this: the warmth of a shared kitchen, the sound of children's laughter drifting in from the house, and the simple comfort of not being alone. The newspaper clipping fell from between the pages of Sarah's worn copy of Pride and Prejudice while she was shelving books at the diner. Jake caught a glimpse of the headline before she could snatch it away. "Blackwood heir dies in tragic accident. Young widow and twin daughters left behind." The photo showed a younger Sarah in pearls and a designer dress, standing beside a handsome man with the twins, barely toddlers then, balanced on his hips. Behind them loomed a mansion that made Jake's modest home look like a garden shed. "I suppose. You should know," Sarah said that evening after the twins were asleep and Tommy had gone upstairs to finish his homework. She smoothed the wrinkled clipping on the kitchen table. "James wasn't just my husband. He was the heir to Blackwood Industries." Jake studied the article's date, 3 years ago. The man in the photo had Sarah's practiced elegance, but a warmth in his eyes that reminded Jake of the twins when they laughed. "Victoria Blackwood," Sarah continued, her fingers tracing her late husband's face. "My mother-in-law, she runs one of the largest private investment firms in the country. James was her only child, groomed from birth to take over the empire." "What happened?" Jake asked gently, noting how Sarah's hands trembled slightly. "Official report says brake failure. The car went off a mountain road in Switzerland." Sarah's voice turned bitter. James had been asking questions about certain company practices, irregularities in the books. He was going to make changes when he took over, make things more transparent. The week before he died, he told me he'd discovered something that could shake the foundation of everything his mother had built. Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the winter wind outside. "You think—" "I don't know what to think," Sarah cut in. But 2 days after the funeral, Victoria demanded custody of the twins, said I was an unfit mother, that James had confided doubts about my stability. She had documents, emails I'd never seen, medical evaluations I'd never undergone. The pieces started falling into place. Sarah's wariness, the constant moving, the careful way she watched over the twins. "You ran," she nodded. "James had set up secret accounts for us, thankfully, but Victoria froze everything she could find. Each time we settle somewhere, her investigators get close. She has connections everywhere, influences we can't fight." The twins, Jake remembered, mentioned a brother, James Jr., from his first marriage. "He was 12 when we met, already under Victoria's complete control. After James died," Sarah's voice cracked, "she turned him against us. He testified about my erratic behavior. My own stepson." Jake reached across the table, covering Sarah's trembling hands with his own. Her fingers were cold despite the kitchen's warmth. "The girls don't know everything," she whispered. "They think we're on an adventure, that their grandmother just doesn't understand our need for independence. How do you tell 8-year-olds that their father might have been—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "You protect them," Jake said, simply. "Like any parent would." Sarah's eyes met his, filled with a gratitude that made his heart ache. "We'll leave as soon as the weather clears. I won't bring this danger to your door. Or," Jake said carefully, "you could stay. Small towns have advantages. People look out for each other here. Victoria Blackwood might have money and influence, but she doesn't have neighbors who've known each other for generations." "Jake, you don't understand what she's capable of." "Maybe not," he admitted, "but I understand what it means to want to protect your children. And sometimes, Sarah, being strong means letting others help carry the weight. Outside, An owl called into the night, its cry carrying across the snow-covered fields. In the silence that followed, Jake could almost hear Sarah's internal struggle, the weary survivor's instinct to run warring with a deeper, desperate need to finally stop running. "The girls," she said finally, "they love it here. This morning Lily asked if she could join the school choir." Jake smiled. "Tommy said she has a voice like an angel. They haven't asked about joining anything in so long." Sarah's eyes filled with tears. "I've been so focused on keeping them safe, I forgot they need to live too." The kitchen clock ticked steadily, marking moments that felt like a turning point. Sometimes, Jake thought, the bravest decisions weren't made in grand gestures, but in quiet kitchens, over cooling cups of tea and old newspaper clippings that carried the weight of unspoken fears. Regulars at Miller's diner began noticing small changes. Fresh flowers appeared on the tables each morning. Nothing fancy, just simple wildflowers arranged in Marie's old mason jars. The daily specials board featured new items with French names that Jake pronounced with endearing awkwardness. And most notably, the sound of children's laughter drifted from the kitchen more often than not. "Your scrambled eggs are different," old Bill commented one morning, peering at Jake over his crossword puzzle. "Better, if that was possible." Jake glanced toward the kitchen where Sarah was showing the twins how to fold napkins into swans. They'd insisted on helping at the diner after school, turning what could have been mere chores into small adventures. "Secret ingredient," Jake replied with a wink, though the real secret was Sarah's insistence on whisking cream into the eggs before cooking. Like many things she'd learned in her previous life, it transformed the ordinary into something special. Tommy had taken to doing his homework at the corner booth, supposedly to keep an eye on the twins, though Jake noticed his son spent more time teaching them card tricks than studying. Today, Lucy and Lily sat on either side of him, their matching heads bent over a piece of paper. "What's the masterpiece?" Jake asked, refilling coffee cups along the counter. "Family portrait," Lily announced proudly, holding up their drawing. "See? That's you flipping pancakes, and Mama making her fancy omelettes, and Tommy teaching us basketball, and Lucy and me helping with the dishes." Jake's heart caught at the simple scene they'd created, all of them together, drawn in bright crayon colors, with smiles that stretched across their faces. They'd even included Marie's old wind chimes, hanging in the window, the ones that tinkled every time someone opened the diner's door. Sarah appeared beside him, her hand brushing his arm as she reached for the coffee pot. The touch seemed accidental, but lately, these small moments of contact had been happening more frequently. Each one sent a warm current through Jake's body, both welcome and terrifying. "They've never drawn our family before," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. "Not since James." The diner's bell chimed as Principal Martinez entered, stamping snow from his boots. "Jake, just the man I needed to see. Got a favor to ask." Jake raised an eyebrow, noting how Sarah quietly slipped back into the kitchen. They'd agreed it was better if she stayed low profile, though hiding her completely in a small town was like trying to hide a sunrise. "The school's career day is coming up," Martinez continued. "Was hoping you'd come talk to the kids about running a small business. Tommy mentioned you might have some help these days, could bring them along too. Always good for students to see different perspectives." Before Jake could respond, there was a crash from the kitchen. One of the twins had dropped a stack of plates and now stood frozen, tears welling in her eyes. "I'm so sorry," Lucy, he could tell by the scar above her eyebrow, whispered. "I didn't mean to." Jake moved quickly, kneeling beside her. "Hey, remember what we say about accidents? They're opportunities to learn," Tommy and Lily chorused together, having heard this particular piece of Jake's wisdom before. Sarah emerged with a broom, but Jake waved her away. "Lucy and I have got this. Why don't you show Lily that new pancake?" "Flip, you been practicing?" The kitchen soon filled with excited gasps as Sarah demonstrated her technique, Lily watching with wide-eyed admiration. Tommy helped Lucy sweep up the broken plates, telling her about his own first accident in the diner, a whole pot of coffee spilled just before the morning rush. Principal Martinez watched the scene with knowing eyes. Seems like you've got quite a crew here now, Jake. Marie would have loved this. The comment caught Jake off guard. He looked around at his expanded family, Sarah teaching Lily to flip pancakes without fear, Tommy and Lucy working together, the family portrait propped proudly on the counter. The diner felt more alive than it had in years. Yeah, he said softly, she would have. Later that evening, after closing, Jake found another drawing tucked under the register. This one showed all of them around a dinner table with a figure, watching from a star in the sky. The twins had labeled it Mama Marie with a heart. Sarah found him staring at it, tears threatening. Without a word, she slipped her hand into his. They stood there in the quiet diner, surrounded by the day's lingering warmth and the promise of more days to come. The girls asked if they could call you Uncle Jake, she said finally. I told them they needed to ask you first. Jake squeezed her hand gently. Uncle Jake, he tested the words, has a nice ring to it, but something in the way Sarah's fingers intertwined with his suggested that maybe someday they'd find an even better name for what they were becoming. December transformed Miller's diner into a wonderland of simple decorations. Paper snowflakes, cut by small, careful hands, danced in the windows. Pine garland, gathered by Tommy from the woods behind the house, draped the counter. And in corner, a modest Christmas tree twinkled with ornaments that told the story of two families becoming one. Tell us about this one, Uncle Jake, Lucy called out, holding up a faded construction paper star. Jake smiled, remembering. Tommy made that in first grade. Your Mama Marie helped him cover it in glitter. Took weeks to get it all out of the carpet. The twins had taken to calling Marie Mama Marie, as if they'd inherited her memory along with her old room. They hung their own handmade ornaments beside Tommy's childhood creations, each one carefully placed to catch the light. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, flour dusting her apron. The scent of her Christmas baking, recipes passed down from her own mother before the Blackwoods and their wealth changed everything, filled the diner with promises of sweetness. My turn, Lily announced, reaching into a box of tissue-wrapped treasures. She pulled out a delicate glass angel, its wings catching the tree lights. Jake saw Sarah stiffen. That was James's, she said softly, from his first Christmas. Her hands twisted her apron. I only saved a few things when we left. Tommy, who had been stringing popcorn garland with surprising patience, looked up. We could put it on top of the tree, he suggested, next to Mom's star. The gesture, putting both lost parents together, watching over their blended family, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Jake crossed the room to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. Perfect spot for them both, he agreed. That evening, after the diner closed early for their holiday celebration, they gathered around the table Jake had expanded with an old leaf found in the attic. The twins wore matching Christmas dresses Sarah had sewn from curtains. Like Maria in The Sound of Music, they'd exclaimed, while Tommy sported the reindeer sweater he'd once declared too childish. Before we eat, Sarah said, in our family, in my first family, we always shared something we're grateful for. Can I go first? Lily asked, practically bouncing in her chair. At Sarah's nod, she burst out, I'm grateful for Uncle Jake's pancakes and Tommy teaching us basketball and our new room and... That's like 10 things, Tommy teased. But his smile was gentle. I'm grateful, Lucy said more quietly, that we don't have to leave anymore. Sarah's hand found Jake's under the table, squeezing tight. I'm grateful, Tommy added, surprising them all, for having sisters, even if they talk too much and use up all the hot water. The twins stuck their tongues out at him in perfect synchronization. Jake looked around the table. At Tommy's emerging confidence, the twins reclaimed childhood joy and Sarah's quiet strength, and felt Marie would have loved this moment. I'm grateful, he said, for second chances. Sarah's eyes met his, full of understanding. And I'm grateful for safe harbors, she whispered, and brave hearts that make room for strangers. After dinner, they snuggled into the living room with hot chocolate and candy canes. The twins convinced Tommy to read The Night Before Christmas. Just as Marie had once read it to him, his voice, already deepening into manhood, gave the familiar words new meaning. Mom used to do the reindeer voices, he remembered suddenly, then demonstrated, making the twins giggle and Jake's heart swell with love for his son's willingness to be silly, to be young, to let new joy in, alongside old grief. Sarah curled beside Jake on the couch, her head finding his shoulder as naturally as if it had always belonged there. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake a tiny gift from a winter sky. "You know," Jake murmured just for her ears, "Marie always said Christmas was for miracles." Sarah watched her daughters teaching Tommy how to make shadow puppets on the wall, their laughter warming the room better than any fire. "Yes," she replied, softly, her fingers finding his again. I believe she was right. The angel and star gazed down from the treetop, two families' guardians keeping watch over this new miracle, the kind that came not with fanfare and trumpet blasts, but in quiet, moments of choosing love over fear, of making room at the table, of saying stay instead of goodbye. December transformed Miller's diner into a wonderland of simple decorations. Paper snowflakes, cut by small, careful hands, danced in the windows. Pine garland, gathered by Tommy from the woods behind the house, draped the counter. And, in the corner, a modest Christmas tree twinkled with ornaments that told the story of two families becoming one. "Tell us about this one, Uncle Jake," Lucy called out, holding up a faded construction paper star. Jake smiled, remembering. "Tommy made that in first grade. Your Mama Marie helped him cover it in glitter. Took weeks to get it all out of the carpet." The twins had taken to calling Marie Mama Marie, as if they'd inherited her memory along with her old room. They hung their own handmade ornaments beside Tommy's childhood creations, each one carefully placed to catch the light. Sarah watched from the kitchen doorway, flour dusting her apron. The scent of her Christmas baking, recipes passed down from her own mother before the Blackwoods and their wealth changed everything, filled the diner with promises of sweetness. "My turn," Lily announced, reaching into a box of tissue-wrapped treasures. She pulled out a delicate glass angel, its wings catching the tree lights. Jake saw Sarah stiffen. "That was James's," she said softly, "from his first Christmas." Her hands twisted her apron. "I only saved a few things when we left." Tommy, who had been stringing popcorn garland with surprising patience, looked up. "We could put it on top of the tree," he suggested, "next to Mom's star." The gesture, putting both lost parents together, watching over their blended family, brought tears to Sarah's eyes. Jake crossed the room to stand beside her, close enough that their shoulders touched. "Perfect spot for them both," he agreed. That evening, after the diner closed early for their holiday celebration, they gathered around the table Jake had expanded with an old leaf found in the attic. The twins wore matching Christmas dresses Sarah had sewn from curtains. "Like Maria in The Sound of Music," they'd exclaimed, while Tommy sported the reindeer sweater he'd once declared too childish. "Before we eat," Sarah said, "in our family, in my first family, we always shared something we're grateful for." "Can I go first?" Lily asked, practically bouncing in her chair. At Sarah's nod, she burst out, "I'm grateful for Uncle Jake's pancakes and Tommy teaching us basketball and our new room and—" "That's like 10 things," Tommy teased. But his smile was gentle. "I'm grateful," Lucy said more quietly, "that we don't have to leave anymore." Sarah's hand found Jake's under the table, squeezing tight. "I'm grateful," Tommy added, surprising them all, "for having sisters, even if they talk too much and use up all the hot water." The twins stuck their tongues out at him in perfect synchronization. Jake looked around the table. At Tommy's emerging confidence, the twins reclaimed childhood joy and Sarah's quiet strength, and felt Marie would have loved this moment. "I'm grateful," he said, "for second chances." Sarah's eyes met his, full of understanding. "And I'm grateful for safe harbors," she whispered, "and brave hearts that make room for strangers." After dinner, they snuggled into the living room with hot chocolate and candy canes. The twins convinced Tommy to read The Night Before Christmas, just as Marie had once read it to him. His voice, already deepening into manhood, gave the familiar words new meaning. Mum used to do the reindeer voices, he remembered suddenly, then demonstrated, making the twins giggle and Jake's heart swell with love for his son's willingness to be silly, to be young, to let new joy in alongside old grief. Sarah curled beside Jake on the couch, her head finding his shoulder as naturally as if it had always belonged there. Outside, snow began to fall, each flake a tiny gift from a winter sky. "You know," Jake murmured just for her ears, "Marie always said Christmas was for miracles." Sarah watched her daughters teaching Tommy how to make shadow puppets on the wall, their laughter warming the room better than any fire. "Yes," she replied, softly, her fingers finding his again. I believe she was right. The angel and star gazed down from the treetop. Two families' guardians keeping watch over this new miracle, the kind that came not with fanfare and trumpet blasts, but in quiet. Moments of choosing love over fear, of making room at the table, of saying stay instead of goodbye. The private jet's arrival shattered the small town's afternoon peace. Its sleek form descended onto the regional airfield like a hawk among sparrows, the name Blackwood emblazoned in gleaming letters along its side. Word spread faster than wildfire, through text messages, phone calls, and the age-old small-town telegraph of neighbor telling neighbor. Sarah was helping the twins with homework in the diner when Jake got the call from Pete the mailman, who moonlighted as a ground crew worker at the airfield. "You should see this woman, Jake. Fur coat in March, pearls big as marbles. Got two men in suits with her, carrying briefcases that probably cost more than my truck." Jake watched Sarah through the kitchen window, her head bent close to Lucy's. As they worked on multiplication tables, she looked up as if sensing his gaze, and he saw the moment she read the warning in his eyes. "They're asking directions to the diner," Pete continued. "Want me to send them on a scenic tour of county roads?" "No," Jake said after a moment. "Let them come. Better here than at the school." Sarah appeared beside him, having sent the twins to the back room with Tommy. "It's time, isn't it?" Before Jake could answer, a black Lincoln Navigator pulled into the parking lot. Even through the diner's windows, they could see the driver's military bearing, the tinted windows speaking of power and privilege. "Whatever happens," Jake said quietly, taking Sarah's hand, "remember you're not alone anymore. Victoria Blackwood's entrance would have been impressive even if the diner hadn't fallen silent at her approach. Tall and elegant, with silver hair swept into an immaculate chignon, she carried herself like royalty. Her wool coat, Jake recognized the same camel. Color Sarah once mentioned loving in her previous life, probably cost more than the diner's monthly revenue. "Sarah." Victoria's voice cut through the quiet, cultured tones, carrying just a hint of steel. "Did you really think you could hide forever in this?" Her gaze swept the humble interior. Establishment. Old Bill, still at his usual spot, deliberately slurped his coffee. "Mother Victoria." Sarah's voice trembled slightly, but held firm. "I see your investigators earned their retainer. They're quite thorough." Victoria gestured, and one of her suits stepped forward with a briefcase. "As are my lawyers. I have here—" "Before you pull out whatever legal documents you've brought," Jake interrupted, moving to stand beside Sarah, "you might want to know that everyone in this diner has already called or texted someone about your arrival. Word travels fast in small towns." Victoria's perfectly sculpted eyebrows rose. "Is that supposed to intimidate me?" "No, ma'am." Jake kept his voice level. "Just letting you know that whatever happens here today will have witnesses, lots of them, as..." On cue, more regular customers began filtering in. Martha from the bank, Principal Martinez, even Pete the mailman, still in his uniform. They took seats quietly, ordered coffee, and watched. Victoria's mask slipped just slightly. "This is a private family matter. That's where you're wrong." Tommy's voice startled them all. He stood in the kitchen doorway, the twins peeking around him. "They are family. Our family." "Tommy," Sarah whispered, but he wasn't finished. "Lucy, helps me with algebra. Lily taught me to make paper cranes, and Sarah—" He glanced at Jake before continuing. "She makes my dad smile again, like Mom used to." Victoria's gaze fixed on the twins, something flickering in her eyes. "Girls, do you remember your grandmother?" Lucy and Lily exchanged glances, that twin speak that needed no words. Then Lucy stepped forward, chin raised in a gesture so like her mother's. "We remember you didn't let us take Mr. Whiskers when you made Mama leave. The cat was property of the estate. He was our friend," Lily cut in, "like everyone here is our friend. Uncle Jake lets us have a goldfish now. His name is Pancake." A snort of laughter escaped from somewhere in the diner, quickly stifled. Victoria's perfect posture stiffened further. "Sarah," she said, her voice lower now, "surely we can discuss this reasonably. Your situation here, it's beneath you, beneath the girls. Think of their education, their future." "I am thinking of their future." Sarah's voice grew stronger. "I see it every day. In their science projects and choir practices, in the way this community has embraced them, in the love they're given, freely and without conditions. Love doesn't pay for college." "No," Jake said quietly, "but it gives you something to come home to after. Something real." Victoria turned to him, really seeing him for the first time. "And I suppose you're the expert on what my grandchildren need?" "Not an expert," Jake replied. "Just someone who knows that happiness doesn't have a price tag. And family isn't about what you can give them. It's about who you choose to be for them." The diner held its breath. Outside, spring was beginning to soften winter's edges. Inside, two worlds faced each other across a weathered linoleum floor, each believing they knew what love looked like. The custody papers arrived the next morning, delivered by Victoria's lawyers rather than the local mail service. Thick manila envelopes filled with legal language that boiled down to one devastating message. Victoria Blackwood was suing for full, in custody of Lucy and Lily. She's claiming emotional manipulation. Sarah's hands shook as she read through the documents at Jake's kitchen table. "Says I've deliberately isolated the girls, denied them their birthright, exposed them to unsuitable living conditions." Her voice broke on the last words. Jake read over her shoulder, anger rising at the clinical way the papers dismissed their life here. The twins' shared room was described as inadequate accommodation. The diner, their sanctuary, was labelled an inappropriate environment for children of their standing. "There's more," Sarah whispered. "She's having James Jr. testify about my unstable behavior after his father's death. My own stepson, Tommy, who had been unusually quiet since Victoria's visit, spoke up from the doorway. 'Can I testify too?' Both adults turned to him in surprise. "I mean it," he continued, moving into the kitchen. "I'll tell them how Lucy and Lily wake up happy now, how they don't flinch at loud noises anymore, how Lily sang a whole song at dinner. Yesterday without checking if it was okay first." Sarah pressed her hands to her mouth, tears spilling over. "I'll tell them," Tommy's voice grew stronger, "about how you make sure they do their homework before helping in the diner. How you taught them to bake cookies but also to clean up after. How you and Dad," he paused, looking between them, "how you make us all feel safe." Jake reached for his son, throat tight with emotion. "Tommy, it's true," Tommy insisted, "and I bet others would testify too. Principal Martinez sees the girls at school. Mrs. Chen from the library knows how they read to younger kids during story time. Even old Bill." A knock at the door interrupted him. Sarah stiffened, but it was only Martha from the bank, accompanied by a tall woman with grey-streaked hair. "Sorry to interrupt," Martha said, though her expression suggested she wasn't sorry at all. "But my sister, Judge Reynolds, retired Judge Reynolds, thought she might stop by." The judge's weathered face creased in a warm smile. "Heard you folks might need some legal counsel. Pro bono, of course. Small towns have to stick together." Sarah stared at her. "But Victoria's lawyers work for one of the biggest firms in the country, yes." Judge Reynolds settled herself at the table, accepting the coffee Jake hurriedly offered. But they don't know our state's family court system like someone who served in it for 30 years. And they certainly don't know our community, she pulled. The custody papers closer, reading glasses perched on her nose. Ah, yes, the old unsuitable environment argument. Tell me, do the girls attend school regularly? They haven't missed a day, Tommy volunteered. Lucy's getting an award for her science project next week. And their emotional well-being. Dr. Patterson, she's our school counselor. She says they're thriving, Jake added. She's written reports about their progress. The judge made notes in a small leather notebook. And their integration into the community? The spring choir concert, Sarah said softly. Lily has a solo. Perfect. Judge Reynolds closed her notebook with a snap. Victoria Blackwood isn't the only one who can build a case. She has money and influence, yes, but we have something better. What's that? Sarah asked. Truth, community, and documented evidence of 2 children flourishing in a stable, loving environment. She leaned forward. Tell me, Sarah, are you ready to stop running and start fighting? Before Sarah could answer, small voices drifted down from upstairs, where the twins were supposedly doing homework. But what if grandmother takes us away? Lily's worried tone carried clearly. She won't, Lucy replied with all the conviction of an 8-year-old. Uncle Jake promised we were family now. And Tommy says Miller promises are forever, like how he promised to teach us basketball, even though we're bad at it. Sarah's eyes met Jake's across the table, something resolute settling in her expression. Yes, she said, turning back to the judge. Yes, I'm ready to fight. Good. Judge Reynolds smiled. Because Victoria Blackwood is about to learn that some things can't be bought. Some things have to be earned, like trust and love and the right to call yourself family. Tommy moved to stand behind Sarah's chair, one hand on her shoulder. Jake took her other hand, their fingers intertwining with practiced ease. Outside, spring rain began to fall, washing away the last of winter's snow. Inside, they gathered their strength for the battle ahead, knowing that sometimes the hardest fights were the ones most worth winning. The letter arrived unexpectedly, delivered by a young man in a rumpled suit who looked nothing like Victoria's polished lawyers. He found Sarah at the diner during the afternoon lull, his hands shaking as he passed her a sealed envelope. I was James's assistant, he explained quietly. He gave me this the day before he left for Switzerland, made me promise to deliver it to you if anything ever happened to him. He glanced nervously over his shoulder. I'm sorry it took so long. Victoria, she has ways of making people disappear. Sarah stared at the envelope, her late husband's familiar handwriting spelling out her name. Why now? Because it's time someone stood up to her. The young man straightened his cheap tie. James would have wanted that. After he left, Sarah sat in the back booth, the unopened letter burning in her hands. Jake found her there, still staring at it. Want me to stay while you read it? He offered softly. She nodded, fingers trembling as she broke the seal. The paper inside carried the faint scent of James's cologne, a ghost of memory that made her eyes sting. My dearest Sarah, she read aloud, voice barely a whisper. If you're reading this, then my suspicions were correct. The irregularities I found in the company books weren't errors. They were deliberate. Mother has been using Blackwood Industries to launder money for years, millions funneled through shadow corporations and offshore accounts. Jake sat beside her, his solid presence anchoring her as the words blurred through her tears. I confronted her yesterday. She talked about legacy, about protecting the family name at all costs. But there was something in her eyes I'd never seen. Before, fear, not of exposure but of losing control. She's built her whole identity around being the powerful Victoria Blackwood. The thought of that power slipping away terrifies her more than any legal consequences. Sarah's hands shook so badly that Jake gently took the letter, continuing where she left off. I'm leaving proof of everything in a safety deposit box at First Geneva Bank. The key is taped inside Lucy's old music box, the one with the ballerina that doesn't spin anymore. Mother never knew about the box. She never paid attention to the children's toys. The music box, Sarah breathed. It's in storage with the few things we kept in the shelter's basement. Jake squeezed her hand, reading on. I'm telling you this not because I want revenge, but because I fear for you and the girls. Mother's need for control. It's pathological. If anything happens to me, she'll try to take the twins. Not out of love, but because they're the last. A piece of the legacy she can still shape. Sarah made a small, broken sound. He knew. All this time, he knew what might happen. There's more, Jake said gently, turning the page. My darling, if you're reading this, know that I died trying to make things right. Know that every moment with you and our girls was worth any price. And know this, Mother's power comes from fear. The only way to beat her is to be braver than she is, ruthless. The letter ended with a series of numbers. Account details. Safety. Deposit box locations. Passwords to encrypted files. But it was the last line that brought fresh tears to Sarah's eyes. Love them fiercely. Live fully. And when you find happiness again, and you will, my love, grab it with both hands. You deserve a lifetime of joy, not just the few years we had. All my love, James. They sat in silence, the weight of truth settling around them. Outside, the afternoon sun painted long shadows across the diner's worn linoleum. Inside, the past and present collided in a letter written by a man who'd seen his death coming but chose to fight anyway. We have to get to that music box, Sarah finally said. Jake nodded. I'll call Pete, have him watch the diner. Tommy can stay with the twins at Martha's. Jake, Sarah grabbed his arm. If Victoria finds out we know, then we'll face it together. He touched her cheek gently. James was right. Her power comes from fear, but you're not alone anymore. And we're not afraid. Sarah looked around. The diner, at Marie's wind chimes dancing in the window, at the twins' artwork decorating the walls, at the life she and Jake had built from broken pieces. James's words echoed in her mind. Grab it with both hands. She reached for Jake, pulling him close. Thank you, she whispered against his shoulder, for being brave enough to love us. Thank you, he replied softly, for being brave enough to stay. The town meeting wasn't officially called one, but that's what it became when old Bill started making phone calls. By sunset, Miller's diner was packed with faces both familiar and surprising. The high school principal, the town council president, 3 retired teachers, and dozens of parents whose children had become friends with the twins. First order of business, Martha from the bank announced, standing behind the counter where Jake usually served coffee, is protecting those girls while we find this evidence. Sarah clutched the petition signatures they'd gathered. Hundreds of them testifying to the twins' well-being in their current home. But it was the other papers, the ones detailing James's discoveries, that could change everything. Victoria's lawyers filed for an emergency hearing, Judge Reynolds explained, her reading glasses perched on her nose. They're pushing for temporary custody during the investigation of Sarah's fitness as a mother. A murmur of anger rippled through the crowd. Over my dead body, Tommy declared from where he sat with the twins at their usual booth, helping them with science homework as if it were any normal evening. Language, Jake warned automatically, but his hand found Sarah's under the table, squeezing gently. Principal Martinez cleared his throat. The girls' school records show exceptional progress. Lucy's science project on local water conservation won first place, and Lily's music teacher says she's a natural leader in choir. And they help my Jimmy with his reading. Mrs. Chen from the library added, such patient girls, explaining the sounds to a kindergartner. More voices joined in, each with a story about the twins' integration into community life. Sarah felt tears threatening as neighbors she barely knew described moments of kindness, achievement, and growth she hadn't even witnessed. All this is, oh good, Judge Reynolds nodded. But what we really need is that music box. Victoria's financial crimes would change everything. About that, Pete, the mailman's grandson, spoke up from the back. The teenager's fingers flew over his laptop keyboard. I've been monitoring Victoria's team. They've got people watching the storage facility. Sarah's heart sank, but old Bill simply chuckled. Good thing the box isn't there anymore then. All eyes turned to him. Bill? Jake asked carefully. What did you do? Oh, not just me. The elderly man's eyes twinkled. Remember last month when we had that town-wide yard sale? Sarah, you mentioned wanting to clear some things from storage. My daughter's church group helped you sort through boxes. Understanding dawned on Sarah's face. Mrs. Harrison took a box of the girls' old toys for the church nursery. And I took that pretty little music box home to fix, old Bill finished. Never could resist a broken mechanical thing. Been sitting on my workbench ever since. The room erupted in relieved laughter. Even Judge Reynolds cracked a smile. Victoria's watching the wrong place. Pete's grandson grinned. Classic misdirection. We'll need to move carefully, the judge cautioned. Chain of evidence is crucial. But first, she turned to Sarah, are you absolutely certain you want to do this? Victoria won't go down easily. Sarah looked around the diner, at Tommy protecting the twins with fierce big brother pride, at Jake, whose love had given them all a second chance, at these townspeople who had become more family than the wealthy circles she'd once moved in. James died trying to expose the truth, she said firmly. I won't let his sacrifice be for nothing, and I won't let Victoria control our children's lives with her secrets and fear. Our children, Jake repeated softly beside her, and Sarah's heart swelled at the simple recognition of their blended family. Then let's get to work, Judge Reynolds declared. Mrs. Chen, you'll take the twins to your book club meeting. Very public, lots of witnesses. Tommy, you and your basketball teammates stick close. Pete, your boys' surveillance photos of Victoria's investigators might come in handy. And Bill, I'll get that music box. The elderly man nodded. But not alone. These old hands shake sometimes. Jake, would you mind helping an old-timer with some delicate work? One by one, their neighbors stepped forward, offering help, protection, and the kind of loyalty that couldn't be bought with all of Victoria's millions. Lucy and Lily, watching from their booth, seemed to grasp the significance of the moment. See? Lucy whispered to her sister. Grandmother was wrong. Real family isn't about being proper or perfect. Lily nodded solemnly. It's about people choosing you, even when it's hard. Sarah overheard them and felt her resolve strengthen. Victoria had power and money, but this town, this family they'd built, had something far more precious. The courage to stand together, the wisdom to know what really mattered, and love strong enough to face down any storm. Late that night, after the town meeting dispersed and the twins were safely asleep at Mrs. Chen's house, Jake found Sarah in Marie's garden. The spring air carried the scent of newly turned earth and budding flowers. Sarah sat on the old wooden bench, turning something over in her hands, Marie's wedding ring, which Jake had given Tommy for safekeeping years ago. Tommy left it on my pillow, Sarah explained softly, not turning around, with a note that said, Mom would have wanted you to have this. Jake's heart caught at the simple gesture from his son. He sat beside her, watching moonlight catch on the ring's modest diamond. Marie bought it herself, he said after a moment, insisted on contributing to her own ring. Said a marriage should start as it means to go on, as a partnership. Sarah smiled slightly. She sounds wonderful. She was. Jake gently took the ring from Sarah's trembling fingers. And she would have loved how you've helped heal our family. How you make Tommy laugh, really laugh, like he hasn't since she died. How you've made this house feel like a home again. Jake, Sarah's voice wavered. What if Victoria wins? What if all of this, the diner, the garden, the life we're building, what if it disappears tomorrow? Instead of answering immediately, Jake reached into his pocket and pulled out a small object that caught the moonlight differently than Marie's ring. A delicate key. Old Bill gave me this while you were talking with Judge Reynolds, he explained. The music box key. We could go get it now, find the evidence, end this fight tonight. Sarah stared at the key. But first, Jake set both ring and key on the bench between them. I need you to know something. Whatever we find in that box, whatever happens with Victoria, it doesn't change how I feel about you. about our family. Sarah's breath caught as Jake turned to face her fully. "I love you," he said simply. "Not because you need saving, or because the twins need a father, or because Tommy needs a mother. I love you because you're brave and kind and strong, because you make the best French toast I've ever tasted, because you sing off key when you think no one's listening, and you still tear up at happy endings even though life hasn't given you many." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks, but she was smiling. "I love you too. So much it scares me sometimes. Then let's be scared together." Jake picked up Marie's ring. "This ring..." Tommy's right. Marie would have wanted it to symbolize love again, not just memory, but "I won't give it to you now." Sarah looked confused. "Because when I do," he continued, "it won't be in the middle of a crisis. It won't be because we're afraid of losing each other. It'll be on a normal day, maybe after the breakfast rush, or while we're helping the twins with homework. It'll be because we've chosen each other freely and fully, with all the complications and joy that brings." Sarah's laugh was watery but real. "That sounds perfect. But for now..." Jake picked up the music box key, pressing it into her palm. "Let's go face Victoria together, as the family we already are, ring or no ring." Sarah closed her fingers around the key, then reached for Jake with her other hand. In the quiet garden, surrounded by Marie's flowers starting to bloom, they shared their first real kiss. It tasted of tears and hope, and the promise of more normal days to come. A sound from the house made them break apart. Tommy stood in the doorway, trying to look stern despite his smile. "If you two are done being romantic," he said, rolling his eyes in teenage fashion, "Old Bill called. Victoria's people just left the storage facility. It's time." Jake helped Sarah to her feet, both of them a bit unsteady with emotion. She carefully tucked both key and ring into her pocket, one representing the past they needed to face, the other promising a future they would build together. "Ready?" Jake asked, not just meaning the mission ahead. Sarah squeezed his hand. "With you, always." Tommy made gagging noises, but his grin was genuine. "Come on, lovebirds. We've got a music box to find and a grandmother to stop. And Lucy's science fair is tomorrow afternoon. We're not missing that for anything." Sarah laughed, the sound carrying across the garden where Marie's wind chimes echoed the melody. Sometimes, she thought, love was grand gestures and dramatic moments, but more often it was this: choosing each other every day, facing problems together, and making sure you made it to your child's science fair, no matter what storms you had to weather. First, Victoria Blackwood stood alone in her hotel suite, staring at the photograph her investigators had just delivered. It showed Jake and Sarah at the diner's closing time, helping the twins with their homework, while Tommy cleared tables. They looked happy, normal, everything she'd convinced herself they couldn't be without wealth and position. But it was another photo that made her hands shake, one taken through the diner's window during lunch rush. Lucy, wearing an oversized apron, proudly showing a customer the science project that had won first prize. The customer's delight, the child's uninhibited smile. It was exactly the way James used to beam at their cook when he'd successfully mastered a new recipe. "Mrs. Blackwood?" Her lawyer hovered nervously in the doorway. "We've received some concerning information about the custody hearing tomorrow." Victoria barely heard him. In her mind, she was seeing James at Lucy's age, before boarding school, and expectations had straightened his shoulders and stiffened his smile. Before she'd taught him that Blackwoods didn't show emotion in public. "It seems," the lawyer continued, "that Judge Reynolds, the retired family court judge who's been advising them, she's submitted a brief. She has documented evidence of the children's improved emotional and academic performance since settling here, and there are hundreds of community character witnesses." "Look at this," Victoria interrupted, holding up the photo. "Lucy's project, it's about water conservation. James did the same project in 3rd grade. Won first place too." Her voice caught. "I didn't attend the science fair. I had a board meeting." The lawyer shifted uncomfortably. "Mrs. Blackwood, About the hearing, I never went to any of his science fairs. The revelation hit her like a physical blow. I sent his father when he was alive. After that, I sent his tutors. There was always something more important. The company, the legacy, the Blackwood name. Speaking of the company, the lawyer pressed on, we've received an anonymous tip. Something about James's last days, irregularities he might have discovered. Victoria's attention snapped back. What kind of irregularities? Financial ones. If these allegations are true, he paused delicately. The custody suit might expose certain sensitive matters. Victoria walked to the window, looking out at the small town that had taken in her grandchildren. Lights were on in most homes despite the late hour. Through one window, she could see a family having a late dinner together. Through another, children were being tucked into bed. "Did you know," she said quietly, "that Lily is singing a solo? In the spring concert, the hotel clerk told me. Said the whole town's going." She turned back to her lawyer. "When was the last time you heard of an entire town turning out for a child's choir performance?" "Mrs. Blackwood, please focus. If James left evidence—" "He did." Victoria's voice was suddenly clear. "My son discovered what I'd done. The money laundering, the offshore accounts, all of it. And instead of using it to protect himself, he tried to protect them." She gestured to the photos scattered across the desk. "He knew what I'd do, knew I'd try to control the girls the way I controlled him. We should discuss strategy." "No." Victoria picked up the science fair photo again. "No more strategies, no more control." She traced Lucy's smile with a trembling finger. "I've already lost one child to my obsession with power. I won't lose them too." The lawyer stared at her. "What are you saying?" Victoria straightened her shoulders, but this time not from pride. "Call Judge Reynolds. Tell her I'd like to meet. Not in court. Somewhere less formal. The diner, perhaps." "The diner, but it's where my grandchildren feel safe." Victoria's voice softened on the word. "It's where they're loved. Not for their inheritance or their potential to carry on a legacy, but for themselves." She looked down at the photo one last time. "The way I should have loved their father." Through the window she could see the diner's lights still on despite the late hour. Inside, she knew a family and a community were preparing to fight for two little girls, not for the Blackwood name or fortune, but for love. Messy, imperfect, unconditional love. James would have liked this place, she whispered, more to herself than her bewildered lawyer. He would have chosen it too. The diner was closed for a private event, the first time since Marie's funeral that Jake hadn't opened for the dinner rush. The tables had been pushed together to form one long family-style setting, white paper placemats marked with names in the twins' careful handwriting, Lucy, Lily, Tommy, Jake, Sarah, and at the far end, written with only slight hesitation, grandmother. Victoria arrived exactly on time, wearing a simple blue dress instead of her usual designer suits. She carried a large, gift-wrapped box that she set carefully beside her chair. "The girls aren't here yet," Sarah said, emerging from the kitchen. "Mrs. Chen is bringing them after choir practice." "That's good," Victoria replied, her usual commanding, tone softened by uncertainty. "I'd like a moment, if we could." Sarah glanced at Jake, who nodded encouragingly from where he was setting out plates. Marie's good china, brought out for special occasions. "I've been going through James's things," Victoria began, once they were seated. "Things I kept in his old room, untouched since we lost him." She pulled an envelope from her purse. "I found his last letter to me, the one I never opened. Sarah's..." Hands trembled as Victoria slid the envelope across the table. "He wrote about you," Victoria continued. "About how you taught him to laugh again after his first wife died. How you showed him that love wasn't a weakness." She swallowed hard. "He said you made him brave enough to stand up to me." "James was always brave," Sarah whispered. "He just needed permission to show it." "Like the twins," Victoria's voice caught. "Yesterday I watched Lucy present her science project, hidden in the back where she couldn't see me. She has his passion." For discovery, his way of lighting up when sharing knowledge. And Lily has his laugh, Sarah added softly. The real one, not the polite society chuckle. I wouldn't know. The words seemed to pain Victoria physically. I never let him laugh like that around me. The diner's bell chimed as Tommy entered, back from basketball practice. He stopped short at seeing Victoria, instinctively moving to stand beside Sarah. It's okay, Sarah assured him, even as her heart swelled at his protectiveness. We're just talking. Tommy didn't budge. The twins will be here soon. Yes, Victoria said, surprising them both by addressing him directly. I understand you've become quite the big brother to them. Someone has to be, Tommy replied, chin raised, since their other brother chose not to. Victoria flinched but nodded. James Jr. He made his choice, as I made mine. We were wrong. The simple admission seemed to catch Tommy off guard. Before he could respond, excited voices approached the diner. Through the window they could see Mrs. Chen walking the twins from her car, their choir robes still on, faces animated as they chatted. They look so happy, Victoria breathed. They are happy, Jake said quietly, joining them. They're loved, not for their potential or their legacy, but for who they are right now. The bell chimed again as the twins burst in, their energy filling the space with light. They stopped abruptly at seeing Victoria, instinctively moving closer to Jake and Sarah. Girls, Victoria said softly, I brought you something, if you'd like to open it. Lucy and Lily exchanged glances, then looked to Sarah, who nodded encouragingly. Together, they approached the wrapped box, carefully lifting the lid. Inside lay 2 identical teddy bears, well worn and slightly faded. The twins gasped. Mr. Buttons and Mr. Bowtie, Lily whispered. From the nursery. Your father named them, Victoria said. He insisted on 2 identical bears because he said twins needed matching friends. Her voice wavered. I kept them after. I couldn't bear to give them away. Lucy reached out tentatively to touch Mr. Button's worn ear. Daddy used to do funny voices for them. He did? Victoria's eyes filled with tears. I never knew that. He was really good at voices, Lily added, especially for bedtime stories. Would you... Victoria hesitated. Would you tell me about the stories? Maybe over dinner. The twins looked to Sarah again, who smiled softly. It's your choice, my darlings. Lucy spoke first, brave like her father. Could we show you our science project too? After dinner? And maybe, Lily added shyly, you could come to my choir concert next week if you want to. Victoria pressed a hand to her mouth, nodding because she couldn't speak. Tommy, watching the scene unfold, quietly pulled out the chair next to him, the one closest to the twins. Here, he said gruffly. You can sit by us if you want to hear all about how Lucy almost set the kitchen on fire with her volcano experiment. I did not, Lucy protested, giggling. It was just a little smoke. And somehow that broke the tension. Jake began bringing out dishes, Sarah's French onion soup, crusty bread, and for dessert, Marie's famous apple pie. The twins settled their old teddy bears in an empty chair between them, occasionally including them in the conversation as they slowly, cautiously began sharing their new life with their grandmother. It wasn't perfect. There were still awkward pauses, careful glances, moments when old hurts surfaced in subtle ways. But it was a beginning. And sometimes, Sarah thought as she watched Victoria lean in to hear Lily's whispered choir secret, beginnings were enough. The house deed arrived without fanfare on a Tuesday morning, handed to Jake by Pete during his regular mail route. The envelope bore Victoria's elegant handwriting, but unlike her previous legal documents, this one carried no threat, only promise. I don't understand, Sarah said, reading over his shoulder in the diner's kitchen. She's giving us the old Wilson property, the Victorian house on Maple Street? Not giving, Jake read further. The deeds in the twins' names, held in trust, until they're 21. But we're named as legal residents and property managers. He looked up. She's making sure we always have a home here. one that can't be taken away. The property was a local landmark, a beautiful old house with wraparound porches and a yard big enough for Marie's garden to be replanted 10 times over. It had stood empty for years, its price tag too steep for local buyers. "There's more," Jake continued, pulling out another document. "She's established a college fund for all 3 children, Tommy included." Sarah sank into a chair. "But the custody suit is being withdrawn." Victoria's voice made them both turn. She stood in the diner's doorway, looking almost uncertain, an expression neither had seen on her face before. "May I come in?" Jake nodded, pulling out a chair. Victoria sat, smoothing her skirt in a gesture that seemed more nervous than prideful now. "The house needs work," she said. "I thought perhaps the twins might enjoy helping choose paint colors for their rooms. And Tommy mentioned wanting a basketball court." "Victoria," Sarah began, but the older woman held up a hand. "Please, let me finish." She took a deep breath. "I've spent my life believing that control was the same as love, that providing material security was enough. I was wrong." Through the kitchen window they could see the twins and Tommy at their usual after-school spot, doing homework at one of the outdoor tables. Lucy was explaining something with broad gestures, while Tommy nodded seriously, and Lily drew diagrams. "Look at them," Victoria said softly. "Really look. They're thriving here, not because of money or status, but because they're safe, loved, free to be children." She turned back to Jake and Sarah. "I won't interfere with that. Not anymore. The house," Jake started, "is my way of supporting your family without controlling it." Victoria's voice strengthened with conviction. "The college fund is the same. No strings, no conditions, just security. The kind that helps dreams grow, instead of binding them." Sarah reached for Jake's hand under the table. "And the company? The evidence James found is being handled." Victoria's mouth set in a firm line. "I've engaged a forensic accounting team. There will be consequences, as there should be, but they'll be faced legally, openly." She managed a small smile. "James would have wanted that." "What about James Jr.?" Sarah asked quietly. Victoria's face fell slightly. "He's angry, feels betrayed, but perhaps seeing his sisters happy, seeing how family can heal." She left the thought unfinished, hope and uncertainty mingling in her voice. Outside, Tommy had started teaching the twins how to spin a basketball on one finger. Their laughter drifted through the window, a sound that seemed to touch something deep in Victoria's expression. "The house has a mother-in-law suite," she mentioned, trying to sound casual, "above the garage. If you wouldn't mind occasional visits, for holidays perhaps, or choir concerts." Jake felt Sarah's hand tighten in his. "I think," he said carefully, "that suite might need its own set of keys, for regular use." Victoria's eyes brightened with unshed tears. "I'd like that, but," Sarah added gently, "with boundaries. Clear ones, for all of us." "Of course," Victoria nodded firmly. I want to learn." The twins chose that moment to burst in, excited about something in their science book. They barely paused at seeing Victoria, their enthusiasm overwhelming any lingering hesitation. "Grandmother, did you know that monarch butterflies navigate by the sun? We're going to build a butterfly garden and track their migration patterns." "Yeah," Tommy added from the doorway, trying to sound casual. "Jake says we can use part of the old garden space, but we'd need more room for all the plants Lucy wants." "The new house," Victoria said, shooting a quick glance at Jake and Sarah, "has excellent southern exposure, perfect for butterflies." The twins' eyes widened as Jake explained about the house. Their excitement, about the rooms they'd get to decorate, the garden they'd plant, the porch swing they'd always wanted, filled the diner with plans and possibilities, and in their joy, something shifted. Victoria wasn't the powerful grandmother, offering gifts from on high, but simply family, included in their dreams, bound by love rather than obligation. It showed in how Lucy unconsciously leaned against her while describing the butterfly garden, how Lily slipped her small hand into Victoria's while talking about paint colors. "There's just one thing," Jake said, once the excitement calmed slightly. "The diner stays. It's part of who we are." Victoria looked around at the worn counter where so much love had grown, at Marie's wind chimes dancing in the window, at the family that had blossomed in this unexpected place. "I wouldn't have it any other way," she said, and meant it. The diner's transformation happened overnight, with the whole town pitching in. White fairy lights twinkled from the ceiling, their glow reflected in the polished chrome and windows. Marie's wind chimes had been joined by dozens more, creating a gentle symphony with every breeze. Garden flowers from the new house filled mason jars on every table, their sweet scent mixing with fresh coffee and baking bread. Sarah stood in the kitchen, wearing a simple cream dress that made her eyes shine. The twins, in matching lavender dresses, couldn't stop twirling in front of the industrial freezer's reflective surface. "Something old," Lucy announced, touching Marie's ring on her mother's finger. "Something new," Lily added, pointing to the pearl earrings Victoria had given Sarah that morning, a peace offering, as much as a gift. "Something borrowed," Tommy said from the doorway, holding out a blue ribbon. "Mum's favorite. Dad kept it all these years." Sarah's eyes filled with tears as Tommy carefully tied the ribbon around her bouquet of wildflowers. He'd grown so much in these past months, not just in height, but in heart. "And something blue," the twins chorused, pointing to the forget-me-nots, woven through their flower crowns. Victoria appeared in the kitchen doorway, wearing a soft grey dress that made her look more grandmother than business mogul. "The guests are seated, and Jake," she smiled, "is practically wearing a path in the floor." Sarah took a deep breath, smoothing her dress. "How do I look?" "Like family," Tommy said simply, offering his arm. They had agreed he would walk her down the aisle, his choice, his way of giving his blessing to this blending of their lives. The ceremony itself was simple, held in the space where so much of their love had grown. Old Bill officiated, his license rushed through by Judge Reynolds, who sat beaming in the front row. The twins scattered rose petals from Marie's garden, while Jake waited by the counter where he'd first offered Sarah and her daughters shelter from the storm. "I've been practicing," he whispered when she reached him, and pulled out a small notebook. "Because some things deserve careful words." "Sarah," he read, his voice steady despite the emotion in his eyes. "I promise to love you. Through breakfast rushes and midnight worries. Through science projects and choir concerts. Through burnt toast and perfect pancakes. I promise to honor the strength that brought you to us, and to spend every day trying to deserve the trust you've shown in staying." Sarah's hands trembled in his as she spoke her own vows. "Jake, you offered shelter to strangers and helped us become family. You showed me that love doesn't have to hurt, that strength can be gentle, that home isn't a place, but the people who make room in their hearts. For you, I promise to fill our days with laughter, to face our challenges together, and to never take for granted the miracle of finding you." "And now," Old Bill announced, "the children have something to say." Tommy stepped forward first, the twins flanking him. "We promise," they spoke in unison, words they'd practiced for weeks, "to be brother and sisters, to protect each other, to share the last cookie, and to always remember that family is about love, not rules." There wasn't a dry eye in the diner as Jake and Sarah exchanged rings. Marie's restored band for her, a simple gold one for him. Even Victoria dabbed at her eyes with an expensive handkerchief. "By the power vested in me," Old Bill's voice carried clearly, "and by the love of this community, I now pronounce you husband and wife, and officially recognize what we've all known for months, that you're a family in every way that matters." The cheer that went up seemed to make the wind chimes dance with extra vigor. As Jake kissed his bride, Tommy and the twins enveloped them in a group hug that had everyone laughing through their tears. The celebration that followed was pure small-town joy. Tables groaned with potluck dishes alongside Victoria's catered hors d'oeuvres. The twins taught their grandmother the electric slide, while Tommy recorded it on his phone, grinning. Sarah and Jake swayed to their first dance as Marie's favorite. Song played on the old jukebox. "Look," Lucy whispered to Lily, pointing to the window where the setting sun painted the sky in brilliant colors. "A double rainbow. Your father loved rainbows," Victoria said softly, joining them. "He used to say they were nature's way of proving that the most beautiful things come after storms." Sarah, overhearing, reached for Jake's hand. Together they watched their family, Tommy showing old Bill a new dance move, the twins leaning against Victoria as she told them stories about their father, the whole town celebrating as if they were all related by something deeper than blood. "Thank you," Jake whispered in her ear. "For what? For staying, for fighting, for making us whole." Sarah looked around the diner where their story began, at the life they'd built from broken pieces and brave choices. "Thank you," she replied, "for making room." Above them, Marie's wind chimes sang in harmony with the new ones, past and present, creating a melody as unique as the family dancing beneath them. 1 year later, the family gathered for a portrait on the wraparound porch of the Victorian house on Maple Street. The butterfly garden the twins had planted blazed with color, monarchs dancing between the flowers like living stained glass. Marie's wind chimes, rehung with care, sang harmony with the new ones Victoria had collected from her travels. Jake and Sarah stood at the center, his arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder. Tommy, now taller than both of them, rolled his eyes at their constant affection but couldn't hide his smile. The twins, in matching overalls spattered with paint from their latest room renovation project, sat on the porch steps with their grandmother. Victoria, who now spent more time in jeans than business suits, had a smudge of dirt on her cheek from helping in the garden. The diner still anchored their days, its counter now marked with heights of 3 growing children and seasoned with the love of 2 families who had become one. And in the quiet moments between breakfast rush and afternoon lull, if you listened carefully, you could hear the sound of happiness built from broken pieces, of love that had weathered storms and emerged stronger, of a family that had chosen each other every single day, because sometimes the best endings aren't endings at all, but beautiful beginnings in disguise. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you.